He spent 15 years building his career, working harder, smarter, always one step ahead. But when Michael Carter earned his promotion to senior vice president, the company's powerful CEO Richard Langston wasn't celebrating, he was plotting. First, the subtle attacks, exclusion from meetings, ideas stolen, whispers behind closed doors. Then the humiliation, a corporate gala, a room full of executives, a public insult that was supposed to break him. But Michael didn't break. Instead, he fought back. He gathered proof. He exposed corruption. And when the truth finally came to light, the man who once ruled the company with an iron grip found himself in a place he never imagined, powerless. What happens when a man built to win at all costs finally loses? Stay tuned to find out. And tell us, if you were in Michael's shoes, what would you have done? Let us know in the comments below. The conference room buzzed with excitement as the senior partners of Langston and McBride Investments gathered for the quarterly executive meeting. It was an important day, one that signaled change. But for Michael Carter, a seasoned financial strategist with over 15 years in the industry, it felt like just another milestone on a long, hard-fought journey. He had earned this moment. As the meeting progressed, Chairman Donald McBride cleared his throat and stood up, commanding the room's attention. Gentlemen and ladies, we've reviewed all the candidates for the senior vice president position. After careful consideration, the board has made a decision. The air thickened. Michael sat upright, hands clasped in his lap, heart steady but expectant. We are pleased to announce that Michael Carter will be stepping into the role of Senior VP of Investment Strategies. A wave of applause rippled through the room. Smiles, nods of approval, and murmurs of agreement filled the space. Michael inhaled deeply, absorbing the moment. It wasn't just a title, it was recognition of his years of diligence, strategic brilliance, and unshakable work ethic. He rose from his chair, extended his hand to McBride, and accepted the firm handshake. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate the trust you've placed in me." "Couldn't think of anyone better," McBride said warmly, but not everyone shared that sentiment. Across the long mahogany table, CEO Richard Langston remained stone-faced. His hands rested on the table, fingers steepled, expression unreadable. Unlike the others, he did not clap, he did not smile, he simply stared. For a man who had spent the last decade leading the firm, Langston had an uncanny ability to mask his emotions. But Michael knew what was behind that expression, displeasure, and maybe something deeper. Later that evening, a celebratory dinner was held at one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. Michael arrived dressed sharply in a tailored navy blue suit, his wife Danielle by his side, beaming with pride. McBride toasted to his promotion. Olivia Whitmore, one of the firm's board members, shared words of encouragement. His closest colleagues congratulated him. But Langston? He sat at the head of the table, swirling his whiskey, watching. At one point in the evening, he finally spoke. "I have to admit, I was surprised when the board made their decision." The table fell silent. Michael met his gaze, surprised. Langston took a slow sip of his drink. "Not that you're capable, of course," he added, voice smooth but laced with condescension. "It's just, well, let's be honest, Carter. A few years ago, someone like you wouldn't have even been in consideration for an SVP role at a firm like this." Danielle's hand instinctively tightened around Michael's under the table. The air grew heavy. Michael smiled, a controlled, knowing smile. "Well, Mr. Langston, I suppose times are changing." Langston chuckled, a low, dismissive sound. "Indeed they are." It wasn't just a comment, it was a warning. That night, as Michael and Danielle drove home, she finally spoke. "He doesn't like that you got promoted," she said. Michael exhaled, glancing at her. "No, he doesn't. He's going to make things difficult for you." Michael nodded, probably. Danielle studied him for a moment. "So what's the plan?" Michael looked ahead, eyes steady. "The same as always, work harder, stay ahead, and when the time comes, be ready." Because he knew one thing for certain, Richard Langston wasn't the kind of man to let something like this go. And this was just the beginning. The shift was subtle at first. A glance held a little too long. A greeting left unanswered. A moment where Michael's suggestions in meetings were acknowledged but never credited to him. It was the kind of discrimination that was never loud, never obvious, but unmistakable. It lived in the spaces between words, in the pauses before responses, in the way his presence was suddenly something to be tolerated rather than valued. Michael had spent years navigating corporate spaces. He knew how to pick up on the signals, and more importantly, he knew how to document them. The first clear incident came during a Monday morning strategy meeting. Michael had spent the weekend preparing a comprehensive market analysis, outlining a new investment approach that could significantly increase the firm's profitability. He presented it confidently, detailing the risks and rewards, the market trends, the projected gains. The room listened, heads nodded. Even McBride seemed impressed. Then Langston spoke. "That's an interesting take, Carter," he said, leaning back in his chair, his tone unreadable. "But I think we should hear from Derek as well." Derek Billings, a senior executive, shifted in his seat. He had barely glanced at the report. Well," Derek began, "I think Michael has some good points, but perhaps we should take a more traditional approach, focusing on our usual high-net-worth clientele." Langston nodded. "That's exactly what I was thinking." Michael sat back, biting the inside of his cheek. Derek had contributed nothing. No counterpoints, no actual insight. But suddenly the conversation shifted in his direction as if his word carried the real weight in the room. The strategy that Michael had spent days refining was brushed aside as merely a suggestion, while Derek's vague, noncommittal response was treated like the final word. Michael didn't react. He simply noted the exchange. The way some people at the table stole glances at him, knowing what was happening but unwilling to speak up. The way Langston's lips curved slightly as if daring Michael to challenge it. It was a game, and Langston was just getting started. The next incident came 2 weeks later. A major client was coming into town, an international investor whose portfolio was worth billions. Michael had worked on the account for over a year, building a strong relationship, ensuring that every aspect of their financial strategy aligned with the firm's goals. The meeting was supposed to be his, but the night before, he received a forwarded email. "Change of plans, meeting rescheduled." The client was now meeting with Langston and a select group of executives. Michael's name was nowhere on the list. He checked his calendar. No conflicts, no reason for the exclusion. Langston was cutting him out. He walked into Langston's office that afternoon, calm and professional. "I noticed I've been removed from the investor meeting," Michael said, keeping his voice level. "Was there a particular reason for that?" Langston barely looked up from his desk. "Oh, just a strategic decision. Thought it would be best if the leadership team handled it." Michael let the words settle before responding. "I am part of the leadership team." Langston finally glanced up, the faintest smirk playing on his lips. "Of course you are, Carter." The way he said it made it sound like a joke, like a reminder that no matter what title Michael had, there were levels to power in this company, and Langston was making it clear who controlled the doors. Michael exhaled quietly, holding his ground. "Understood," he said. "I appreciate the clarification." Langston tilted his head. "You're handling this well, that's good, keep doing that." Michael didn't react, didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing any frustration. He turned and walked out, already planning his next move. That evening, Danielle noticed the tension in his shoulders as they sat down for dinner. "What happened?" she asked, pouring them each a glass of wine. Michael set down his fork, rolling his shoulders back. "Langston's trying to push me out." Danielle sighed. "I knew it, what's your next step?" Michael thought for a moment. "I document everything, I stay sharp, and I wait." Danielle studied him, then nodded. "Whatever happens, you're not going through this alone." Michael reached across the table, taking her hand. "I know." He had been underestimated before, doubted, dismissed, but he had never been defeated. Langston was playing a long game, but so was Michael. The grand ballroom of the Carlisle Hotel shimmered under the soft glow of chandeliers, a sea of elite executives, investors, and industry leaders filling the space. This was the annual corporate gala, the most prestigious event on Langston and McBride's calendar. Deals were made here, alliances formed, reputations solidified. It was also the first time Michael Carter would be attending as senior vice president. Dressed in a sharp black tuxedo, Michael moved through the crowd with effortless grace. He greeted colleagues, shook hands with clients, exchanged pleasantries with board members. He had earned his place here not as an outsider, not as a guest, but as a leader. Danielle stood beside him in an elegant midnight blue gown, her presence both grounding and radiant. "You look good up here," she said softly. Michael smirked. "I belong up here." Across the room, Richard Langston watched. When the event's formal proceedings began, the attendees were ushered toward their tables. Langston, ever the showman, took the stage first, delivering his state of the firm address. He spoke with his usual confidence, charismatic, poised, and expert at commanding a room. Then came the moment Michael had been anticipating. The firm's new leaders were to be recognized. Chairman Donald McBride stood, smiling as he raised a glass. Tonight, we celebrate not only our successes, but the exceptional talent that drives this firm forward. And no one exemplifies that better than our newest senior vice president, Michael Carter. A wave of applause spread across the room. Michael rose from his seat, nodding in appreciation. He felt the weight of the moment, the acknowledgement of his years of work, the silent nods from those who respected him. Then Langston took the microphone again. "Yes, let's hear it for Michael," he said, clapping slowly. "Quite the story, isn't it?" Something about his tone made the applause taper off slightly. Langston turned toward the audience, adopting an almost casual, amused expression. "You know, when I first met Michael, I remember thinking, this guy has something different, and clearly the board saw it too." He chuckled, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "Or maybe, just maybe, it's because every company these days needs to meet their diversity quota, huh?" The laughter came hesitantly, uncertain. Some chuckled nervously, unsure whether it was meant to be a joke. Others stiffened, eyes darting toward Michael. Michael remained seated, his expression unreadable. Langston smirked, pretending as if he hadn't said something calculated, as if it were nothing more than light-hearted banter. "Oh, come on, relax, we all know Michael's talented," he said, grinning. "But let's be honest. 20 years ago, would anyone have imagined a guy like him making it to senior VP at a firm like this?" The room went silent. Michael could feel Danielle's grip tighten around his wrist under the table. He saw Olivia Whitmore, the board member who had advocated for him, shift uncomfortably in her seat. Others avoided his gaze altogether, while a few smirked knowingly, enjoying the spectacle. Langston set down his drink. "All jokes aside," he continued, "Michael, I think I speak for everyone when I say we're all watching to see if you prove them right or prove them wrong. The message was clear: you don't belong here, you have to prove yourself in a way others don't." A slow breath, a steady heart. Michael had learned long ago not to react in the moment. Instead, he smiled. A small, knowing smile that disarmed and unsettled at the same time. He picked up his glass, raised it slightly toward Langston. "Here to proving people wrong," he said smoothly. A murmur rippled through the room, some clapped, some nodded approvingly. Others, Langston included, didn't look as amused anymore. Michael held Langston's gaze for a beat longer, then took a sip. The moment passed, but the air had shifted. The humiliation Langston had intended to inflict hadn't landed the way he expected, but Michael knew it wasn't over. That night, as they drove home, Danielle was quiet for most of the ride. Then finally she spoke. "He's trying to bait you." Michael nodded, "And I'm not biting. He won't stop." Michael exhaled, looking out at the city lights flashing past the window. "I know." But if Langston thought this was the beginning of Michael's downfall, he had severely underestimated him. Because while Langston was playing for power, Michael was playing for justice. And this time, he was making sure there was a record of everything. The morning after the gala, Michael arrived at the office earlier than usual. The city was still waking up, but he was already at his desk, staring at the recording on his phone. Someone had sent it to him overnight. A grainy but clear video clip of Langston's remarks from the gala. "You know, when I first met Michael, I remember thinking, this guy has something different. And clearly, the board saw it too. Or maybe, just maybe, it's because every company these days needs to meet their diversity quota, huh?" The words hung in the air. Even through the screen, the hesitation in the audience was palpable. The discomfort, the forced chuckles. The way Langston had pushed too far but reveled in it anyway. Michael pressed pause. He wasn't surprised that someone had recorded it. Events like that always had people capturing snippets of speeches, moments for social media. What surprised him was who had sent it to him. The text attached to the video read, "You'll need this, trust me." The number was unknown, but Michael had a guess. He wasn't alone in this, and that meant Langston's days of unchecked power were numbered. But this wasn't just about one incident. Michael had learned long ago that winning against men like Langston required precision, patience, and proof. He couldn't afford a public outburst or a reckless move. He needed to build a case. And that's exactly what he planned to do. That morning, the firm operated as usual, but something had shifted. Whispers circulated. People avoided eye contact with Michael in the halls, unsure whether to acknowledge what had happened or pretend it didn't exist. Langston, however, walked through the office with his usual arrogance, greeting people as if nothing had occurred. Michael waited until just before lunch to approach HR Director Angela Morris. She was a cautious woman, not one to rock the boat, but she was fair. and more importantly, she had seen the video too. "Michael," she greeted stiffly when he walked into her office. "I assume you're here about last night." Michael took a seat across from her desk, studying her expression. She was torn. She wanted to help, but she also knew who Langston was. "Angela, I need to file a formal complaint against Langston," he said, laying it out plainly. His comments were inappropriate, discriminatory, and in violation of the firm's policies. Angela exhaled, her fingers drumming lightly on the desk. "Michael, you know this won't be easy." "I don't expect it to be, but I expect it to be handled." She hesitated. "I'll document it, but I can't promise the board will act on it." Michael leaned forward slightly. "Then I'll make sure they have no choice." Angela sighed, nodding reluctantly. "I'll start the process." As Michael left her office, he knew one thing: HR was not going to protect him. If anything, they'd stall, delay, bury the complaint until it was forgotten. That was fine. He wasn't relying on them. He was building his own case. Over the next few weeks, Michael operated strategically. He documented everything: emails, meeting exclusions, dismissals of his ideas, subtle undermining. He looped in allies without making his intentions obvious. Olivia Whitmore, the board member who had always supported him, started quietly sending him internal memos. A junior analyst whispered to him in passing, "They're trying to pin a project failure on you." Langston, unaware that Michael was gathering ammunition, ramped up his efforts. Meetings Michael should have been leading were suddenly handed to someone else. The firm's biggest client, a hedge fund Michael had secured, was assigned to a different executive. His performance reviews suddenly contained vague areas of concern. And then Langston made a critical mistake. An internal memo circulated, one Michael wasn't supposed to see. In it, Langston explicitly recommended against Michael's promotion months before, citing reasons that had nothing to do with merit. Olivia forwarded it to him with a single message. "This is the proof you need." Michael read it twice, a slow, measured grin forming. Now he had them. The next step was clear. He needed one final move to force this all into the light, and for that he needed the boardroom showdown. The walls of Langston and McBride's executive offices had always been designed to keep secrets in and outsiders out. But Michael had learned that even in a fortress, cracks eventually formed. And tonight he was about to slip through one. He sat in his office, staring at his laptop screen. The forwarded internal memo from Olivia Whitmore was open in front of him, Langston's signature bold and undeniable at the bottom. "Michael Carter is not a good fit for senior vice president. Though competent, he lacks the cultural alignment necessary for a firm of this caliber. While promoting him may satisfy external expectations, it will create long-term challenges internally. Our firm should remain committed to leaders who reflect the values that built it." Michael let out a slow breath. Cultural alignment. They might as well have just said it outright. This wasn't just a case of discrimination anymore, this was institutional strategy. Langston hadn't just acted on personal bias, he had built barriers to ensure people like Michael never reached leadership levels. Michael leaned back, gripping his phone. Olivia had risked a lot sending him this. She had been careful up until now, offering small bits of information, subtle nudges in the right direction. But this was evidence. He hit the dial button she picked up after 2 rings. "I figured you call." Michael exhaled. "You realize what you just sent me?" "Of course I do," Olivia said, her voice calm. "And I'm prepared to back you when the time comes." That gave Michael pause. "You're putting yourself in the middle of this." "I've been in the middle of it for years," she said. "I just stopped pretending otherwise." Michael closed his eyes for a moment. Olivia Whitmore wasn't just any board member, she was the board's most influential member, the widow of a former partner and someone who had seen men like Langston operate for decades. "Why now?" he asked. A pause, then, "Because he's gotten sloppy, and because I'm tired of watching good people like you get pushed aside." Michael nodded to himself. "Then let's take him down the right way." There was a beat of silence. Then Olivia's voice came through, steady and sharp. "Are you ready for this, Michael? If we do this, you'll be pushing against the firm's entire system." Michael didn't hesitate. "I've been ready since the moment he tried to humiliate me." The following Monday, Olivia moved swiftly. A special board meeting was scheduled, one Langston hadn't initiated. That alone was enough to put him on edge. Michael sat at the long conference table, composed, silent, watching everything. Langston walked in at the last moment, his presence as commanding as ever but his eyes sharp with suspicion. He could feel the shift in the room. Let's get this over with, Langston said, dropping into his chair. What's this about? Olivia cleared her throat. Richard, we've received concerning reports about your leadership. Langston scoffed. Concerning, we're more profitable than ever. What exactly is the issue? Michael didn't move. He let Olivia do the first cut. The way you treated Michael at the gala, for starters. Olivia's voice was steady. It was inappropriate, unprofessional, and a clear violation of company policy. Langston laughed, shaking his head. Oh, give me a break, it was a joke. Olivia didn't blink. That joke now has over 1 million views online. Langston's smirk faltered. Michael had stayed quiet up until now, but this was the moment. He leaned forward, speaking for the first time. And it's not just the gala. He placed a folder on the table, sliding it forward. There's a documented pattern of exclusionary behavior, denying me access to meetings, rerouting clients I developed, fabricating performance concerns. Langston's face darkened. This is absurd. Olivia nodded to another board member who pulled out copies of Langston's memo. The air in the room shifted. Would you care to explain this? Olivia asked. Langston's eyes scanned the document. He paled slightly but recovered quickly. That was an internal discussion, a private matter of leadership strategy. Michael raised an eyebrow. You called my promotion a diversity quota win in front of hundreds of people. What exactly is private about that? Langston opened his mouth, but another voice cut in. Donald McBride, the co-founder of the firm. The man Langston had always pretended to be aligned with. This firm was built on merit, Richard, McBride said, his voice measured but firm. And yet this memo suggests you were willing to block a qualified executive simply because of his race. Langston swallowed. He knew what this meant. McBride hadn't spoken out before, but now it was publicly acknowledged. And that meant there were only two ways this would go. Either Langston would fight back hard or he would fold under pressure. Michael sat back, letting the silence do the work. He had played his part. Now it was time for the board to decide. For a moment, the boardroom sat in heavy silence. Papers lay spread across the polished oak table, Langston's own words betraying him, evidence now too glaring to ignore. The very walls seemed to press in, holding decades of corporate hierarchy, power games, and whispered deals within their cold embrace. Richard Langston, a man who had spent years untouchable, was not used to being cornered. He ran a hand along his jaw, then forced a chuckle. So this is what we're doing. His voice, usually smooth and controlled, carried an undercurrent of something new: anger. We're staging a tribunal over a joke. Michael met his gaze evenly. This isn't about a joke, it's about a documented pattern of discrimination. It's about my career being deliberately sabotaged under your leadership. Langston leaned back, exhaling sharply through his nose, his eyes scanning the room for allies. For years, he had ruled with an iron grip wrapped in a velvet glove, rewarding loyalty, punishing dissent. But today, some of those familiar faces, executives who once nodded at his every word, now avoided his eyes. He turned to McBride, the co-founder. Donald, surely you don't think this is worth our time. Michael has been with this firm for what, 10 years? If I had an issue with him, wouldn't I have gotten rid of him long before now? McBride didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied Langston with the patience of a man who had seen too much to be deceived easily. The problem, Richard, McBride finally said, voice slow and deliberate, is that this isn't just about one man. I have a feeling that if we start looking deeper, Michael won't be the only one with similar experiences. Langston's jaw tightened. Michael recognized the shift immediately. Langston was no longer just trying to deny. He was calculating a new defense, a counterattack. And then, just as Michael had predicted, Langston did exactly what men like him always did when their power was threatened. He went on the offensive. Langston sat up straighter, regaining his composure, his voice suddenly measured and sharp. You know what? I find this whole thing fascinating. His eyes flickered to Michael. You, Carter, have been playing this game for a while, haven't you? Michael remained silent. I mean, let's look at the facts, Langston continued, spreading his hands. You get promoted to senior VP, a position you're barely in for 2 months, and suddenly you're the victim of some grand conspiracy. Meanwhile, I've been running this firm successfully for over a decade, and you expect everyone here to believe that I suddenly have it out for you. The shift in tone wasn't for Michael, it was for the board. Langston was appealing to doubt, to fear of change, and it was working. Michael could see some board members fidgeting, some glancing at each other with uncertainty. Because that was the game, wasn't it? People in power didn't have to prove innocence, they just had to create enough doubt that taking action felt too risky. Langston pressed on, his voice gaining momentum. This firm has been through wars, recessions, market collapses, and you think it makes sense to risk my leadership over what? A bad joke and some corporate politics. Michael clenched his jaw, forcing himself to breathe evenly. Langston was doing exactly what Michael had anticipated, shifting the conversation from facts to feelings. This wasn't about guilt anymore, it was about control. Michael had been collecting evidence for weeks, but Langston had spent years building relationships, consolidating influence, pulling strings behind the scenes. And right now he was trying to weaponize every ounce of it. Michael waited. He didn't interrupt. Didn't react. He let Langston say everything he needed to say. And then when the silence finally settled again, Michael made his move. He reached into his folder and pulled out a stack of emails, hard copies, time-stamped, verified communications, and placed them on the table one by one. He didn't speak yet. He let the board members see the proof first. Langston's direct orders to exclude Michael from key meetings. Langston's attempt to reroute major clients away from Michael's management. Langston's personal approval of a fabricated negative performance report designed to sabotage Michael's standing. And at the very top, the memo, the one Olivia had sent. Langston's exact words, black and white, undeniable. Michael folded his hands, then he spoke, his voice calm, even deadly precise. This isn't about a joke, this is about a pattern, one you've tried to keep hidden, one you've been executing carefully for years, but now it's out in the open. Langston's face drained of color, because now it wasn't just Michael's word against his. It was documented, it was official, and it was in the hands of the entire board. For the first time, Langston hesitated. His hand twitched near his glass, fingers tightening around it like it was the only thing anchoring him. He saw the shift in the board, the way some were leaning toward Michael now, rereading the emails, murmuring amongst themselves. It was a power shift, a small one, but enough. And Langston knew it. That was when the rage set in. He shoved back his chair, the screeching sound loud against the marble floor. "You know what?" he snapped. "I don't need to explain myself, I've built this firm. I made it what it is today." His hand jabbed toward the board. "And if you people are actually considering throwing me under the bus for this, over him, then maybe you're all just as weak as I suspected." A ripple of discomfort spread across the room. Michael didn't flinch. "Sounds like you're nervous, Richard." His voice was calm, almost amused. Langston's glare snapped to him. "You think this means anything?" he hissed. "You think a couple of emails and some whiny complaints are enough to take me down?" Michael's smile was cold and precise. "No, Richard, I think you're about to take yourself down." Langston exhaled sharply, his face twisting with fury. For the first time in his career, he wasn't the one in control, and it was eating him alive. Langston stood at the head of the table, his face red with fury, his control slipping like sand through his fingers. The silence in the room was thick, suffocating. He had ruled this company for over a decade. His name was synonymous with power, with control, with absolute authority. But now, as he looked around the boardroom, he saw it: doubt. They weren't looking at him the way they used to. They weren't nodding along, waiting for his word to be law. No, they were looking at Michael now, and Langston hated it. "This is a damn setup," he spat, his voice laced with venom. "You all know I built this firm, and now you're turning on me because this guy got his feelings hurt." Michael stayed seated, his hands folded in front of him. His heart was steady, his breathing was controlled. He had prepared for this exact moment. He leaned forward slightly. "It's not about feelings, Richard, it's about facts." Langston laughed bitterly. "Facts, please, this is politics. You're all too afraid of the optics. You'd rather throw me under the bus than deal with the backlash from the outside world." Olivia finally spoke, her voice calm but razor-sharp. "No, Richard, we'd rather not be sued for discrimination." Langston snapped toward her. "Oh, come on, Olivia, you're smarter than this. You know how the game works." "Yes," she said, her tone never wavering. "I do." Langston's eyes darted around the room, searching for support but found only silence. Then Donald McBride, the co-founder, stood up slowly. His presence alone was enough to command absolute attention. "Richard," McBride said, his voice measured but firm, "I have always respected your leadership, but you made a mistake." Langston's hands curled into fists. "And what mistake was that, Donald?" McBride exhaled. "You thought you were bigger than the firm." The words hung in the air like a hammer about to drop. Langston scoffed, but Michael saw it, the flicker of realization, the creeping knowledge that he was losing. Michael took his chance. You tried to push me out, he said, voice even. You manipulated performance reviews. You excluded me from leadership decisions. You tried to erase my contributions so you could control the narrative. Langston pointed a shaking finger at him. You little. Michael didn't flinch. You used your power not to lead but to gatekeep. And now you're facing the consequences. Langston let out a bitter laugh. Oh, you think you've won? He turned to the board, desperate now, throwing out one last card. You think replacing me is going to fix your problems? Do any of you actually believe Carter can do what I do? A pause, then McBride looked at him, expression unreadable. You've been doing a lot of talking, Richard, but I don't think you've noticed the vote already happened. Langston froze. Michael watched as realization hit him all at once. Slowly, Olivia slid a piece of paper across the table, a formal motion, a signature list, a decision already made. Langston's hands trembled as he picked up the document, his eyes scanning the signatures. 7 votes to remove him as CEO, 3 against. His world shattered in real time. For the first time in his career, Richard Langston had lost. He inhaled sharply, his pride bleeding out onto the polished table in front of him. His kingdom, his empire, was being pulled from beneath him brick by brick. He clenched his jaw. You're making a mistake. McBride tilted his head slightly. No, Richard, you did. A painful silence filled the room. Langston looked at Michael, hatred simmering in his eyes. Michael held his gaze unmoving. Finally, Langston straightened, brushing off his jacket as if trying to salvage what little dignity he had left. Fine, he muttered. You all want me gone, I'll leave. McBride nodded, effective immediately. Langston's breath hitched, his eyes snapping toward him. Wait, what? McBride slid another document across the table, a forced resignation agreement. It was already written, all it needed was a signature. You can leave quietly, McBride said, or we make it public. Langston's lips parted in disbelief. He had never been given an ultimatum before, and now there was no way out. Michael watched every second of it, watched as Langston gritted his teeth, grabbed the pen, and without another word signed away his kingdom. The room exhaled, and just like that, Richard Langston was no longer CEO. Outside the boardroom, Michael stepped into the cold, crisp air of the office corridor. He could feel the shift, the end of an era, the weight of a battle won. Danielle's voice came through his phone a second later. How did it go? Michael smiled, looking out over the city skyline. Langston's out. A pause, then Danielle laughed softly. I knew you win. Michael exhaled, his breath steady. I didn't just win. He looked back at the boardroom doors where Langston's reign had officially ended. I changed everything. The firm was different the next morning. Not in the way that the walls had changed or the offices looked any less extravagant, but in the energy, the air felt lighter. Langston's nameplate had already been removed from his office door. The emails had gone out. The press release had been carefully crafted. The board had ensured that the transition appeared graceful, strategic, rather than the scandalous takedown it really was. But the people in the office knew. They knew Langston hadn't just stepped down, he had been forced out, and they knew who had done it. Michael walked through the corridors, noticing the way people looked at him now, not with the quiet, uncertain glances they used to give him, not with the hesitation of people trying to figure out how much space he was allowed to occupy. No, now they looked at him with respect, with acknowledgement, with understanding that he had earned every inch of the space he stood in. By noon, Michael was called back into the boardroom. This time, it wasn't a war zone. Donald McBride sat at the head of the table, Olivia Whitmore beside him. The remaining board members who had once wavered in their support now leaned forward attentively. McBride cleared his throat. Michael, he said, I think you know why we called you here. Michael sat back waiting. The firm needs new leadership, McBride continued. Stability, strength, someone who understands both the past and the future of this company. Olivia smiled slightly. We want to offer you the position of CEO. The words hung in the air. Michael had expected this. He had known it was coming the moment Langston signed his resignation. But still, hearing it out loud, he let it settle. A black CEO at Langston and McBride Investments, something that was never meant to happen, something Langston had fought to prevent. Michael exhaled slowly, his mind turning. He could fix the culture. He could reshape the future of leadership in this industry. He could ensure that what happened to him never happened to anyone else again, but as tempting as it was, he already knew his answer. He glanced at Olivia, then at McBride. I appreciate the offer, he said carefully, but I have to decline. A flicker of surprise passed through McBride's face. Are you sure? Michael nodded. I didn't fight this battle just to take Langston's place, he said. I fought it because I wanted change, and I can't do that by staying in the same system that tried to break me. Olivia tilted her head. What are you thinking? Michael smiled. I'm starting my own firm. A quiet murmur passed around the table, not out of doubt but understanding. McBride leaned back, nodding slowly. Then I'll make you a deal, he said. When you do, we'll be your first investor. Michael held his gaze, then extended his hand. Deal. They shook on it. That evening, as Michael stepped into his home, Danielle was already waiting. She had that look, the one that meant she had read every piece of news, every whisper about the boardroom war, every speculative article about what was next for him. She folded her arms. So. Michael grinned. I turned it down. Danielle smirked. I knew you would. He exhaled, loosening his tie. I think I'm ready for something bigger. Danielle walked over, wrapping her arms around him. Good, because you were never meant to just inherit power. She leaned in, pressing a kiss to his cheek. You were meant to build it. Epilogue: The legacy begins. 1 year later, Michael Carter stood at the front of a brand new office space. His name wasn't just on the door, it was on the building. Carter Global Investments, a firm built on merit, opportunity, and integrity. A firm that ensured barriers were broken, not built. Langston and McBride had remained a powerhouse, but it wasn't the same. The culture had shifted. The internal systems were under scrutiny. And though they would never publicly admit it, they had been forced to change because of him. Michael knew this was only the beginning. And as he looked at the future he had carved for himself, not inherited, not given, but earned, he smiled. Because justice had been served, but more importantly, a new era had begun.